Right, moving right along. While everything we've learned thus far has been incredibly important, what we're going to learn in this lecture is perhaps the most important, considering these are going to be the things that we use to build our web pages. Now, what I'm talking about are divs and spans, and more importantly, divs, and that's D-I-V. So, what is a div and what is a span? Well, they are block elements and inline elements. So, a block level element is something that starts on a new line when it's displayed in the browser. So, for example, let's go ahead and delete this entire table here. We no longer need this. And let's just write an H1, which happens to be a block element. And let's just give this a header. And then let's go ahead and write paragraph, which is also a block element. And we'll write paragraph. Now below this, I want to write what we call inline elements. And an inline element is something that does not start on a new line. Now we've seen this already, so let's do perhaps a link. So ahref equals, and let's do, how about just google.com. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll close that link. Right, Google. So this is an example of an inline element, and let's do one more inline element below this just so we can see the effect here. And we could do perhaps B for bold, and we'll just write some text here, hello. All right, so if we take a look at this, we're going to see, oops, and it's still pulling something dated here. Let's go ahead and hit Control Save. Maybe if I save that. All right, there we go. So the title still says let's play with tables, that's fine. But we'll notice that our header is on its own line, and it automatically starts the next line, the paragraph, on its own line. That's because it's a block element. The same with the paragraph. We don't have any content next to it because it's a block element as well. Well, Google and hello, these are both inline elements, meaning they don't start on a new line. Now, why did I just explain this? Well, because when I explain what a div is and what a span is, a div is a block level element and a span is an inline element. So let's go ahead and delete this content here, and we're going to start playing with divs. So let's just change this for the sake of, you know what, we can go ahead and get rid of this H1 so we don't have to change this every time. I don't know why we've been doing that. And we'll just call this div and span. Oops, let's do div and span page. Great. So now we need to create our very first div. And if you haven't guessed, a div is simply a div. The same syntax we've used this entire time. Now, traditionally, we use a div to hold specific content. And I like to think of a div as pretty much a box. And these boxes are usually going to be invisible, even though we can see what's going on. So, and think of a div as a styling block for our content. And it may be hard to imagine what I'm talking about right now. So why don't we just go ahead and put some stuff inside our div and see what I mean. So let's go ahead and write, hello world, this is my first div. Now, we're not going to really be able to tell much by looking at this in our preview menu. Whoops. Make sure I go ahead and save that and look at the live preview. All right, so all this looks like is text. I'm not seeing anything, right? Well, let's go ahead and we're going to have to add a little style here just so we can see what's going on. I'm going to add another div here, and let's go ahead and write, this is my second div. Now, because we know that divs are inherently going to be block elements, when we view this, it's going to have these text on two different lines. But if you think about it, these are actually in these little squares, or rather rectangles, because they're going to take up naturally the entire size of our web page. So let's go ahead and we're going to apply a little style here. So I'm going to write div, and after the V we hit style equals quotations, and this is going to be CSS. We'll get into this just right what I'm writing right now. We'll learn a lot more about this in a little bit. And let's just do a background color, and we're just going to do black. And then also I'd like to do, and that's going to be background dash color with a colon, then write black semicolon, and then we're going to write just color. And essentially what this is going to do is going to change the text color. And let's make this white and then do a colon, white, semicolon to finish off those styles. And let's go ahead and copy this style, and we're going to apply the same exact style to our second div. So space, let's implement that. And then I'm going to go ahead and save that and preview it now. This will show us the background of these divs. So we can see our first div here, and you know what? It may be a better idea to change the background color of our second one. Whoops, apologize. To, let's do blue, just so we can see the difference of the two rectangles. Let's preview that, make sure. All right, so there we can see the actual structure of these divs. We have these long rectangles. Well, we can actually style these so, you know, there's a lot more space above the text and to the left of the text and to the right of the text, and pretty much unlimited things we can do with CSS. But all of our web pages are going to be built with these types of sections. So either divs or what I'm going to talk about in a moment, spans. These are going to be our building blocks, and inherently they're going to stack one on top of the other, but they're not necessarily limited to that. We can have 5 divs all next to each other, all equal spaced. So maybe we want 5 icons centered in the middle of a div, all next to each other, running horizontally. Well, if we don't want to use perhaps a menu, we could use, a list that we run horizontally, we can use a div. So we'll be using divs a lot, especially when we get into making our own websites, and you will learn a lot more about that. But now let's talk really quickly about the span element. Now, unlike a div or a block element, our span element, which we're going to play with in a second, is an inline element. And what we're really mostly going to use this for is it's going to be a container for text. And I mean that because we may want to change the formatting or the color of a specific word within a sentence, but we don't want it to start a new line, right? We want it to continue to flow as if the sentence were continuing to flow. So let's go ahead, minimize really quickly, and within this div, so obviously these can be embedded within each other, we could write a span. But let's go ahead and start a new line here, and I'm just going to use an H1 example here, and we'll do it within an H1 tag. And let's write, this is a, and outside of this A is where I want to start my span, because I want the blue head. I want to write, this is a blue header, and I want the text of the blue to actually be blue. But I don't want to change the style of the H1 because that'll change all the text. So what I can do is type span, and inside this I'll put blue. And on the outside of this, to finish off, I'll say this is a blue space header. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to create a blue header here. So obviously this hasn't done anything. All I've done is, you know, put a span here. If we view this, it's just going to look like a header text that says this is a blue header. Well, we have to use our span with styling. So similar to what we did with the div, let's hit span style. And I'm going to this time write color, similar to what we did up there, blue, and save that, and let's preview this. So now we'll have this is a blue header. So for spans, we don't want it to start a new line. We want to use spans so we can pretty much manipulate the style of different text elements.